Have you ever wondered how one ordinary day can completely change the rest of your life? I know exactly what that feels like because it happened to me. For most of my life I was always on the move. I worked hard installing basketball goals for schools, colleges, churches, parks, and even professional facilities. I loved working with my hands, solving problems, and staying active. Every morning I woke up with a purpose. I had plans for the future, and I honestly believed tomorrow would look just like today. Then one day everything changed. If someone had told me that my life was about to take a completely different direction, I probably would have laughed. I felt like I had plenty of years ahead of me. I wasn't thinking about hospitals, wheelchairs, rehabilitation, or learning basic things all over again. Stroke was something that happened to other people, not me. At least that's what I believed. The day it happened started like any other normal day. There were no warning sirens, no dramatic signs, no feeling that this would become the most important day of my life. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. At first I noticed something that didn't feel right. My body felt different. My balance wasn't the same. I remember trying to ignore it because that's what most of us do. We convince ourselves that we're just tired. Maybe we didn't sleep enough. Maybe we skipped breakfast. Maybe stress is catching up with us. I told myself exactly those things. I kept thinking this feeling would disappear in a few minutes. Instead, it became worse. I noticed weakness that I couldn't explain. My speech didn't sound normal. Words that should have come naturally suddenly became difficult. My body wasn't responding the way it always had. Even then, my first thought wasn't that I was having a stroke. That's something I want everyone watching to understand. When you're the one experiencing a medical emergency, your brain often tries to find simple explanations instead of accepting the truth. You tell yourself you're fine. You tell yourself to wait. You tell yourself it will pass. Sometimes those few minutes can change everything. Looking back now, I wish I had recognized the warning signs sooner. I wish I had understood how important every second really was. Doctors have a saying, time is brain. I didn't fully understand what that meant until later. Every minute during a stroke, brain cells can be damaged and those cells may never come back. That's why recognizing the symptoms early can literally save a life. The scary part is that strokes don't always look the way they do in movies. Sometimes there's no dramatic collapse. Sometimes the symptoms are quiet. A weak arm, slurred speech, confusion, trouble walking. A face that suddenly feels different. These small changes are your body's way of asking for help. Never ignore them. Eventually it became impossible for me to pretend everything was okay. The people around me realized something serious was happening. I could see concern on their faces even before I truly understood what was going on. That was the moment fear started replacing denial. Inside my mind I kept asking myself, what's happening to me? Why can't I control my body? Why can't I speak the way I normally do? Those questions didn't have immediate answers. Everything started moving quickly. Emergency responders, doctors, nurses, medical equipment, bright hospital lights. It all felt like a dream that I couldn't wake up from. I remember lying there feeling helpless. For someone who had always been independent, that feeling was one of the hardest things I had ever experienced. I wasn't worried about work anymore. I wasn't worried about money. I wasn't worried about my schedule. I was wondering if I would ever have a normal life again. Would I ever walk normally? Would I ever drive again? Would I ever return to work? Would I ever be able to enjoy the simple things that I had taken for granted every single day? Those questions stayed with me for a long time. The doctors explained that recovery wouldn't happen overnight. There would be therapy, exercises, frustration, good days, bad days, and a lot of patience. At that moment, patience was the last thing I wanted. I wanted my old life back. Immediately. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the hardest journeys teach us the greatest lessons. I had no idea that this experience would completely change the way I looked at life forever. The first few days after my stroke were unlike anything I had ever experienced. I had always been the kind of person who solved problems. If something broke, I fixed it. If a job looked difficult, I figured it out. But this was different. For the first time in my life, I couldn't simply work harder to make everything better. My body had its own timeline, and I had no choice but to respect it. Every morning I woke up hoping that everything would suddenly be back to normal. Every morning I realized it wasn't. That was one of the hardest emotional battles. Accepting reality doesn't mean giving up. It means understanding where you are so you can begin moving forward. The therapists encouraged me to focus on small goals. At first I thought that sounded ridiculous. How could something as simple as standing up or taking a few steps be considered a goal? Then I tried it. That's when I realized how much strength those small victories actually required. The first time I stood on my own, I felt like I had climbed a mountain. The first time I walked a few steps without losing my balance, I felt proud in a way I had never experienced before. The things we take for granted become priceless when they're suddenly taken away. Walking, talking, eating, driving, even tying your shoes. These are gifts. We don't usually think of them as gifts until we lose them. Recovery also tested my patience. There were days when I felt stronger. Then the next day it seemed like I had gone backwards. That can be incredibly discouraging. You start asking yourself if all the hard work is even worth it. But healing isn't a straight line. Some days you move forward. Some days you simply hold your ground. Both are part of recovery. One lesson I learned is that progress is often invisible. You don't notice it from one day to the next. But when you compare yourself to where you were a month ago, you suddenly realize how far you've come. That realization gave me hope. I also discovered how important the people around me really were. Family members encouraged me when I wanted to quit. Friends reminded me that I was still the same person even though my circumstances had changed. Doctors and therapists believed in me even when I doubted myself. Sometimes someone else's belief in you is enough to keep you moving forward. During recovery I had a lot of time to think. When your world suddenly slows down, you begin noticing things you never appreciated before. I thought about how often I had rushed through life, always focused on the next project, the next paycheck, the next responsibility. I rarely stopped to appreciate the present moment. My stroke forced me to slow down. It forced me to notice the people who loved me. It forced me to appreciate every little improvement. It forced me to become grateful for things I once ignored. Looking back now, I can honestly say that gratitude became one of the most powerful parts of my recovery. Not because everything was perfect, but because I learned to celebrate every small victory. One clear sentence, one steady step, one good day. Those moments became reasons to keep fighting. There were nights when fear still kept me awake. I wondered what the future would look like. Would I ever return to the work I loved? Would people see me differently? Would my life ever feel normal again? Those questions didn't disappear overnight, but little by little they stopped controlling me. I realized something important. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could decide how I responded to it. I could either spend the rest of my life asking why this happened, or I could ask what this experience could teach me. That simple change in perspective changed everything. Instead of seeing myself as someone whose life had ended, I started seeing myself as someone beginning a completely new chapter. It wasn't the chapter I had planned. But sometimes the chapters we never choose become the ones that define us the most.